Good morning. I want to welcome you as members of the Airports Authority Board and Management, and to thank you for coming. Based on the documents that you've submitted and the report of the Auditor General, which prompted those responses, and based on some of the questions we sent, we are going to ask you some questions about those in the public interest. The purpose of this meeting of the Public Accounts Committee is to examine the report of the Auditor General of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago on the financial statements of the Airports Authority, Trinidad and Tobago, for the years 2008-2012. So we'll examine the reports and your responses for that period, but that does not mean we are going to ignore contemporary issues. The committee is desirous of hearing the challenges being faced by the key stakeholders of the Airports Authority of Trinidad and Tobago, in an attempt to determine some of the possible solutions to these challenges. The role of this committee is to help the Airports Authority of Trinidad and Tobago improve its delivery of services in an efficient and effective economic manner. Now, this meeting is being held in public. Actually, we are being recorded here, and it will be broadcast later on Parliament Channel 11 and Radio 105.5 FM and the Parliament's YouTube channel ParlView. Now, what I will do is that I'll ask the members of the Airports Authority who are present, if you'd please introduce yourself. I will then ask the members of the Auditor General's Department who are here to introduce themselves. And my colleagues who sit here as part of the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee will also identify themselves, and then we'll begin the meeting. I will start the meeting by asking you, the Permanent Secretary. I'll ask the Permanent Secretary to make a statement, and if the Chairman has a statement, we'll also accommodate that before we start the questioning. Okay? So you can start with your introduction.
Keith Thomas, Chairman of the Authority.
Hayden Newton, General Manager of the Airports Authority of Trinidad and Tobago.
Emmanuel Barr, Deputy General Manager, Estate Planning and Business Development, Acting.
Karen Funili, Legal Advisor, Acting.
Shannon Rudd, Corporate Secretary.
Carmela Wallace-Shanklin, Financial Controller, Acting.
Raquel Miller, Manager of Engineering Services.
Albert Griffith, Deputy General Manager, Security.
Stacey Cornell, Internal Audit Manager, Acting.
Sorry? Anybody else didn't introduce yourself? I don't think.
Sorry, Chair, we didn't introduce ourselves because we didn't hear Ministry of Works and Transport, but I take it that it was intended. Sonia Francis here with Acting Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Works and Transport.
Good morning, Chair and members. I'm Dahan Matiramdat, Acting Deputy Permanent Secretary of Ministry of Works and Transport.
Yeah, well, I didn't mention the ministry, I mentioned the PS, but I should have. And we welcome the Ministry of Works and Transport, and we hope that by the responses we get both from Ministry and Airports Authority, we'll be clearer at the end of the session. Members of the Auditor General's Department.
Good morning. Shiva Stananan, Assistant Auditor General.
Good morning. Anisha Bash, Assistant Audit Director.
Okay, and well, I'm chair of the committee. My name is Boindra Tiwari. I'm the chair of this committee and a member of the House of Representatives. And I'll ask my colleagues going around here to introduce themselves.
Good day, everyone. Tahara Kobika, Vice Chair, Senator.
Morning, everyone. Lester Henry, member.
Good morning, everyone. Ayana Webster, member.
Morning, Adrian Lyons, member.
Good morning, all. Melissa Rampisu, member.
Okay.
Yes, Chair. Chair, the Airports Authority of Trinidad and Tobago is a body established by the Airports Authority Act, Chapter 49. Its identified remit is to, in the main, develop and manage the business of the airports, including the development, maintenance, or improvement of their facilities in a cost-effective manner so as to ensure the availability of efficient, secure, and safe aviation services to the public at all times, as well as to ensure commercial viability. The Airports Authority of Trinidad has been placed under the remit of the Minister of Works and Transport, and by extension, the Ministry of Works and Transport via Gazette number 97 of 2015. In this context, the Ministry sees its role as provision of oversight and support to the authority in keeping with the policy directives provided by the government's 2030 vision and the authority's strategic objectives. As it relates to the accounts of the authority, the Ministry is guided by sections 19 to 23 of the Airports Authority Act. In that context, Chair, members, we stand ready to answer any question that you may require input.
Yes, I do. Good morning, Chairman and members. As Chairman of the Board appointed on January 23rd this year, I thank the committee for its invitation to this session, affording the opportunity to deliver brief remarks, but more importantly, be a party to the authority's responses and committee's comments, recommendations firsthand. The Act establishing the authority requires that we deliver efficient, secure, and safe aviation services while maintaining commercial viability. In doing so, research suggests we recognize another fundamental purpose. ICAO's own studies apart, our regions, Warrell, Belgrave, and Craigswell, speak to the positive relationship between economic growth and expenditure on infrastructure. Green, in turn, speaks to the association between airport passengers and employment growth while controlling further factors. And Bruckner, in some ways quite pertinent to us, concludes that airports and airline services contribute more to knowledge and service-based businesses than other types. To all, yes, but knowledge and service-based businesses more so. While airports undeniably influence and are influenced by the economic environment, the contribution of our Act-mandated role to economic development must also serve to energize and inspire us at the authority. This board has been in office 8 weeks. That notwithstanding, I wish to merely draw attention to the following. To deliver on its core mandate in a sustainable manner, the authority is committed to a business model that will see a significant adjustment to its revenue mix. While growing in all areas, non-aeronautical revenue is to become its major revenue stream, and more will be said about projects on our estate in the coming months. Approval of an updated strategic plan and associated structure will be done by end April this year. Performance to industry benchmarks and metrics will continue to be front and center, as will cash flow management and capital requirements for major projects. Business analytics is to be a way of life for the authority. It will drive our decision-making processes. It is recognized that our brand is affected every time one of our family of service providers delivers superior or inferior service to the traveling public. Our staff is therefore being continuously developed to lead in the areas under our direct control and to collaborate, share, encourage, and inspire in areas not so. With our contribution to economic development in focus, major development works on the A&R Robinson International Airport is and will be a top priority project for the authority over the next 2.5 years. All the above, of course, within the context of a strict international and local regulatory environment. Mr. Chairman, we understand and accept this committee is here to help. In welcoming that and considering both the period under review and our board's time in office, we avail to you an executive team best suited to respond to your questions. This committee team will be led by our experienced General Manager, Hayden Newton. Thank you once again for allowing these brief remarks, as well as your gracious offer to our General Manager to deliver some remarks of his own. Thank you.
Some remarks.
Good morning to the members of the committee, Chairman. The Airports Authority of Trinidad and Tobago is a complex organization. It's a complex system, actually. We responded to several voices of data, and we have to do it as a balancing act and ensuring we manage the organization properly. We responded to the voice of the public, national and international. We responded to the voice of our employees and labor, the unions. We responded to the voice of the regulator, and the regulator here is not only a national regulator, but also an international regulator in the form of the International Civil Aviation Organization. We responded to the voice of business, the question of financing, the question of ensuring that we look at the important metrics in terms of financially making sure the organization is able to be sustainable. We responded to the voice of the government, the line ministry, yes, but the Ministry of National Security, because it's also a port of entry, Ministry of Planning, Ministry of Finance. We have responded to the voice of process in the issue of ICT, security, engineering, and the latest development in terms of aviation. Most importantly, we responded to the voice of numerous stakeholders, including the tenants, the airlines, the taxi drivers, the customs, immigrations, the fire services, Air Guard, to name a few. We also responded to the voice of good governance in terms of ensuring that we are ethical and we comply legally with respect to all the requirements. Chairman, the Airports Authority stand ready to respond to the questions that you would ask, and we understand the role of the committee, and we look forward to the recommendations that will come from the committee. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think General Manager Newton, by outlining the Airports Authority and its links with key stakeholders that determine how it functions, I think you gave us a good opening into the discussion. So I will start with some general questions and I'll pass on to my colleagues. And you will find that as we continue with the questions, we will be much more pointed and focused. We will start generally at first, but we will get to some of the nitty-gritties later. I also want to thank the chairman for his outline and presentation, and the permanent secretary, Ms. Frances Yearwood, for her presentation as well on behalf of the Ministry of Works and Transport as Oversight Ministry. Now, you've outlined, General Manager, the framework within which you operate in terms of the demands that are made of you. And one of the things that you mentioned there was, besides the responsiveness that you have to carry to all of these stakeholders, you mentioned the issue of financial sustainability. How would you describe your situation now in terms of facts and figures in this year, 2018, for the Airports Authority in terms of your financial situation, and secondly, the economic possibilities that lie before you?
Thank you, Chairman. Like all entities in Trinidad and Tobago, the Airports Authority is coping with the challenge of the economic environment. What we would want to say, however, is that we have put in place systems which perhaps allows us to properly or better able to deal with some of the challenges. We really, in terms of the Airports Authority, we have two main sources of revenue: aeronautical revenue, non-aeronautical revenue. Aeronautical revenue meaning revenue that is directly associated with the landings and takeoff of the airlines. Non-aeronautical revenue means the indirect revenue, that revenue that comes from indirect activities, the car parks, the concession fees, and the like. What the Airports Authority has been able to do over the last night, when I checked back on the records, I look at the records, since 2003, the Airports Authority has not, in fact, come to the central government for any kind of financing for its recurrent and maintenance expenditures, operating expenditure. We have received support from the central government in terms of the question of the capital expenditure programs over the years, and the last time we would have gotten a government guaranteed load would be somewhere in 2013. And we have received public sector investment program funding in the last time we would have received in 2014. But for the recurrent expenditure generally, we have not been in receipt of any kind of government subventions. We have been operating the authority on the basis of what we call internally generated funds, based upon the revenues. In fact, mindful of the economic environment, we have focused on ensuring that we prioritize our expenditure to ensure that we're able to support the maintenance that needs to be done, and also some of the capital expenditure programs. But we are mindful of the challenges. One, we are operating in a situation where we have an aging infrastructure. The chairman pointed to the fact that we had worked. Yes. Yes. Okay.
How much does it cost you to run the operation? How much of that do you operate internally? Do you generate internally? And if you have a deficit, how do you manage that? And start with those basics, and then you can go on.
In terms of operating results, Chairman, the revenue we make is sufficient to meet our recurrent expenditure. So we operate with a surplus until you make the provisions for things such as depreciation. So if you use the metric of earnings before interest, taxes, and depreciation and amortization, Airports Authority is in fact in the positive with respect to that. And I'll get.
Yeah, great.
Yes, Chair. Yeah, so I'm looking at revenue versus expenditure on an annual basis. We have a surplus.
Okay.
That's a fact. And I could point to my financial controller to give you some figures, Chairman, in terms of last year, the current situation.
Yeah, the numbers would be important for the public to know.
For 2017, our revenues total 403 million, and our expenses, our total operating expenses, was in the vicinity of 313 million. After depreciation, then we would have gotten a deficit. Before depreciation, we would have had a surplus of 80 million.
Okay. General Manager, you can continue. Yeah.
Chairman, yes, I was making the point that notwithstanding that, we recognize the fact that there are certain challenges that we'll have to deal with as we go on. One is the fact that we have an aging infrastructure. And having said that, when we benchmark with respect to both estates, and we're looking here at the Caribbean and Latin American region, Airports Authority, and this is based upon World Economic Forum surveys, Airports Authority of Trinidad and Tobago ranks second in terms of infrastructural development in Latin America and the Caribbean. We are second only to Tucumán in terms of the infrastructural development at the both estates. So notwithstanding that challenges, I'm saying that. But we recognize the fact that we have an aging infrastructure that we would need to, in fact, renew. We are faced with inefficient design and poor quality work that was done in terms of the build-out at PIACO. And we have, in fact, been putting things in place to ensure that we are able to effectively operate even in that context. But maintenance is becoming expensive. We have a challenge with respect to working capital, and we put it on the record one time because we have one large account receivables which, for all intents and purposes, appear to be uncollectible. And that is, of course, the question of the Caribbean Airlines debt. So we recognize the fact. How much is that
as of today?
Based upon our records as at February 2018, in our books, it's $192.4 million.
Okay.
Yes. So those are some of the challenges we are coping with. We recognize that there's a need at some point in time for a huge capital expenditure investment to deal with some of these challenges. For example, we do our pavement management studies, and it's done every 3 years. And of course, the most recent one I've said that we need to do some work in terms of our pavements. We have started some of that work utilizing internally generated funds, but the kind of expenditure that will be required we will need support, or we'll have to, in fact, look at doing it in a different way. Okay?
Right. Among the things that you mentioned in terms of stakeholders that you have to manage, I mean, an airport, in a way, is a strategic enterprise for the movement of people in and out of your country.
Yes.
And the management of airline flow in and out.
Yes.
But it's also a national security operation because basically it guards your borders, it manages your borders. Within the Airports Authority, you have customs, you have immigration. You have your own security apparatus within the organization. You have the management of the, what do you call that? The management of the flow of airlines and the exit of airlines by technical people who are involved in that. How does the Airport Authority figure in relation to all of these key operations?
Okay. The Airports Authority operates as the center of control in terms of ensuring that there's coordination with respect to these key operators. And as the chairman say, where in fact one of the key operators in fact don't perform effectively, the person who actually gets the blame is the Airports Authority. It has been a challenge to do that, but that's one of the challenges in any international airport. What we have done, and we feel we have done fairly effectively, is that we have ensured that there is more than a good relationship, but a clear line of ensuring that the major entities operate by way of what we could call an airport council in terms of meeting and ensuring that we coordinate activities. The Airports Authority itself has also been involved in ensuring that we work with them in terms of things such as customer service. Because, Chairman, we would have done surveys. We participate in one of the surveys of the Airport Council International, known as the ASQ survey. It's done internationally. And, of course, those surveys point to what are the challenges and the weaknesses that the users of the facility have identified. And some of the things that they have identified are related directly to our operations, but some are, well, when I say directly, under our direct control as Airports Authority. But some point to the fact that some of our stakeholders, there's a need to ensure that they are up to a particular standard. So that has been the challenge, but we have been working with all our stakeholders. And the stakeholders are here not only in terms of the government stakeholders, but also the private sector stakeholders who operate on the estate, to attempt to ensure that we effectively manage and deal with the expectation of the users of the facilities. Because everybody have traveled internationally, so there's a significant expectation in terms of what is what is expected at both facilities. So that is one of the things that we have been doing, Chairman, and we will continue to do that. In fact, the Airports Authority as an entity can't consider itself to be successful unless we ensure that the partners around us are in fact also doing the right thing.
Okay, so you say that you have a council which basically manages that so that fairly autonomous institutions can operate within a framework outlined by the Airports Authority, both for standards of efficiency for these institutions and effectiveness, but also for customer service and related activity. How does something like what happened recently happen in an airport such as Piarco, where you have a situation in which basically you had people walking on the tarmac of the old airport? Does the old airport fall under your jurisdiction?
Yeah, we call it the South Terminal, yes.
Right.
Yes, yeah.
So how do you explain a situation in which people walk on the tarmac of the old airport and effect significant robbery involving, what can I say, firearms and so on? Did that happen, first of all, and what has happened since?
All right. I will talk to it, and then I'll point you to the head of security to go into some kind of more detail.
Yes.
First, I want to clear the records. That did not occur on the tarmac as was reported in the Republic at all.
Okay.
Right, the tarmac is our secure area. It did not occur that. It occurred on an area where the public have access before what we call our air side, so to speak, in terms of landside air side. So it definitely occurred on the land side, and it occurred in an area where the customs have access, where the public has access to do work in terms of customs, in terms of bringing in goods and stuff like that, right? Now, one of the things we want to point to in terms of
let me clarify, because this is a public issue, and I think people want to know. Let me clarify. This is a customs-controlled area.
It's an area where the public has access to get the barrels and stuff like that.
Yes, so it's a customs-controlled area where the public has access, but it still falls under the jurisdiction of the Airports Authority.
Yes, the whole estate falls under the jurisdiction.
All right, okay.
Yes, that's correct. That's correct. One of the points I want to talk about in terms, and in talking to the public with respect to security matters, I'm very guarded, Chair, but let me talk to this particular situation. We operate in an environment where risk assessments are important. A risk comes into your range of contemplation, and you take action to deal with it. The point I want to make is if a risk doesn't come into your range of contemplation, you may not necessarily...
You're not prepared.
I would like to ask my head of security to give some further details in terms of it, because I know members of the public would have been... This is an important issue for members of the public.
Yes,
but the point before I go to him, I want to point that, in fact, in no way was the security of the Airports Authority compromised by what happened, right? Primary, I want to make the point also in terms of security in our environment, that our primary responsibility is to, in fact, ensure that there's unlawful interference with respect to aviation. No unlawful interference with aviation, right? And we are guided by the annexes in terms of IQ. We do all the other security in terms of policing and also property management. But I want to point to the fact that the primary function in terms of airport security is the question of what we guided on by Annex 17 of the International Civil Aviation Organization. But I would ask Mr. Colonel Griffith to go into more details with respect to this.
Sure.
Good morning again, Chairman and members. And just to amplify what the General Manager just explained, and I want to take it from the point of view of his explanation with regard to ranges of risk that come into your contemplation. Several of these transactions were taking place on a fairly regular basis, on an almost weekly basis, and by transactions I mean the movement of large amounts of cash between the two islands. And this was happening without the awareness of the Airports Authority, notwithstanding that it was happening on Airports Authority property. Now, I'd like to say in the very first instance that it is entirely understandable why details regarding the shipment of large amounts of cash would be kept to a small select few. Nevertheless, situations like that alter the entire risk profile of the airport. In other words, if you have a $5 million payload of cash in the airport, it endangers airport users simply because it's there and it's a target. And it was largely under those circumstances that the robbery occurred. What we've done since then is hold meetings with the bank that was involved and the courier company, the security company that was involved, to ensure that as the persons responsible for security on the airport's estate, that we are apprised every single time there is such a transaction taking place, and to ensure that we put measures in place to mitigate the risk. And, you know, Chairman, there's very little that we cannot deal with on the airport estate with sufficient notice. They have been compliant so far. They have been.
So you have a notification process now?
Yes.
And select security.
Yes, very select, very select, very small. And once we have the notice, we put things in place to ensure that that risk is mitigated. And we've had, you know, it's been a pretty good working relationship thus far.
Okay, I'll pass on to my colleagues to ask some questions. Go ahead, Vice Chairman. Yes, you want to follow?
Yes, just to clarify what you have just said. So based on what the general manager has said, you had a full staff turn out that particular day. Your systems of notification is in place, but is it that the courier did not notify the security? Is that what you're saying? Or is it that regardless of a full working crew, this still could happen?
The point we're making is that, in fact, we were not aware. It wasn't in our range of contemplation. We didn't want aware.
This notification is based on a certain particular amount, or how does the courier know that they need to notify the airport's authority? Is this something written, is a policy, or is this a best practice that the airport's authority has presently?
It is the whole concept of risk management. If you have to, in fact, make sure that there are, in fact, systems in place to manage the various risks that comes to your identification. It wasn't been done prior to that. We have now, since that, put systems in place to ensure specifically with this issue. And it's not an issue in terms of the question of the amount of money and stuff like that. But if, in fact, we're talking about moving valuables, monies, those kind of things, the airport's authority, and that's what the Deputy General Manager of Security is perhaps saying. The airport's authority, as the chief security operator in the estate, should at least have some kind of information with respect to that.
Chair, I don't want the public to get the idea that regardless of a full working security staff at the airport's authority, this could just happen. And that is how it's playing out. It seems that you all were at maximum or typical day. You all have the provisions to provide a safe facility, but yet this could happen.
Let me ask this head of security to respond to you.
Yeah, to clarify, on a day-to-day basis, there are a number of routine security activities that take place at the airport, and we normally outfitted and configured and organized in such a way as to deal with these. The point that the general manager is making is that any activity that is beyond that range, any activity that is anomalous in terms of your routine, once those things are brought to our attention, we're more than in a position to mitigate any associated risk. What happened in this particular instance and what had happened in the lead up to it, shipments of cash were being moved between the two islands without the airport's authority being notified. Once that happens and the risk profile of the airport changes, we should be notified. What we've done since then is to put measures in place to make sure that we are aware of these movements and that we can support the activity mitigate all of the risks associated, not just on the Piaco side, but on both sides of the country, both airports. And we're satisfied that we have these arrangements in place at present.
Public accounts enterprise, what additional costs this has put you under for these additional measures to ensure that we have a safe and we have proper risk management happening at the Airports Authority?
I wouldn't point to additional costs, member. What it points to the fact is that we have to reorganize our resources to ensure that we're able to deal with the risk.
Follow-up question still on this particular matter, because it's very important. It has to do with security. You have a situation now. You've corrected a situation by establishing a protocol, right? Is that correct? And on the basis of this protocol of notification, you are now able to be properly prepared and to plan for eventualities around what you are notified about. Is that correct?
I would say it's correct, Chair.
Yeah, I think the issue that is problematic is this. You've established the protocol and you are now prepared when you get a notification. But the question that arises is really, how could armed men enter the airport precincts and execute a robbery? And in the absence of this particular situation that is covered by the protocol, is the airport still vulnerable to a situation in which armed men can enter the precincts and execute whatever?
Chair, the Airports Authority has in fact put things in place to deal with a situation like this, right? In terms of the question of, we are mindful of what is happening in terms of the environment. And as a consequence, our security apparatus has in fact now been challenged to ensure that we're able to respond. For example, we see what is happening outside in terms of things such as active shooter. So the Airports Authority immediately has moved to ensure that we have trained our people, and in fact we have a drill coming up in May with respect to the question of active shooter incidents. So the point I am making is that our security apparatus is sufficiently strong to deal with these kind of challenges and to respond to, we can't say that it's not going to occur because we know what kind of country we're in right now. We know the challenges we're having. But we are going to be responding effectively in the event that these things happen.
Okay, we take your explanation and I move on to Senator.
Thanks, Chair. I really didn't want to prosecute that matter. I have prepared several questions regarding the strategic plan. I just want to ask one narrow question because it begs the question as to whether or not all companies, all users of the airport facility, if they have to follow this protocol in advance without prompting from Airports Authority, stating, okay, maybe I'm moving some gold, maybe I'm moving something else that may be of value, some antique items, or individuals or whatever. I'm moving anything, any type of cargo that could be at risk of the same action. Is it that they have to inform Airports Authority in advance, or is it that you have to now go and seek them out?
Ask Colonel Griffith to perhaps respond as the head of security.
Thank you for the question, member. And you have to forgive me for answering a bit guardedly, considering the nature of the subject matter. And of course, we'd be more than happy to amplify you know, in a session that might not necessarily be open. For the moment, suffice it to say that there are a range of things that happen. People moving valuables, for instance, normally do so, take the prioritize doing so on the basis of having their own security apparatus and so on in place for that kind of activity. And more often than not, we are at the very least advised when these things are happening so that once again we can support the transaction over the course or over the duration that the event is taking place. And we do have some very detailed measures and detailed procedures and so on in place, but I would really ask your indulgence in terms of not necessarily pursuing those in this particular forum.
We appreciate the security considerations.
All right. So I wouldn't deal with that anymore, but I think we understand that is a situation that the country is interested in, the fact that I've deviated from my line of questioning. What I really wanted to look at is the strategic plan 2018 to 2022 of the Airports Authority, and to ask the first question before I ask the main question, was it internally done or externally sourced?
Okay, the plan was in fact done with a combination of internal and external assistance. We had this assistance of a consultants in terms of facilitating, but really it came what we see there came out of the bowels of the organization. It came out of meetings between the employees and the key stakeholders.
That is understandable, the facilitation method. The question I really have, because my concern lies with the actionable items, because normally an action plan really is what you reduce any strategic plan to. And I'm not seeing, because I look at page 45 of the strat plan in terms of the PowerPoint presentation, apart from the use of real estate to create opportunities for revenue generation, and also targeting other airlines to use Piaco, I guess Tobago as well. I'm not seeing a concerted effort in terms of the goals, the measurable goals that set stretch objectives to increase the revenue projection. Because you made a mention of the EBITDA, the earnings before interest, depreciation, and amortization, being favorable to you, notwithstanding the issue with payments from Caribbean Airlines, which really and truly on a cash basis may render that somewhat impotent. It strives at the issue of hub development, and we're making some advances. I'm taking it along because I'm trying to just bring the point hub development regarding Brazil coming here and Africa and probably the Far East, but I'm not seeing that ventilated in the action plan. Is this hub development going to be aggressively?
We note your comment and we take your comment. One of the things that we have been working with the line ministry is the question, and we recently established the Standing Negotiating Committee on Air Services, because that is a critical prerequisite with respect to the question of developing the aviation or the aeronautical revenue side of it. For example, Airports Authority is a part, and we participate annually in conferences. One of it is called Roots Development, Roots of Americas and Roots World. And what comes out is we attempt to sit down with the various airlines to convince them to fly Piaco or fly ANR as a part of a point-to-point or a hub situation. One of the challenges we have had is the fact that we have not had air services agreement with some destinations, and we're in the process of doing that. For example, and I'll give you an example. We met, and Emirates is interested in flying to Piaco. Emirates had an arrangement that fell through with Panama. The challenge right now is that we don't have an air services agreement with the United Arab Emirates. And while you could, that shouldn't be a fetter. Emirates is suggesting that, in fact, they want a full air services agreement before we, in fact, contemplate coming into Piaco. So the point is that there is background work that needs to be done in terms of the aviation side, and we continue to do that. Yes.
Is it that, I'm repeating for record, is it that Emirates wanted a single hub across the Atlantic, or we had to still route through Europe?
The manager estate plan and business development to give you some more details.
Thank you, GM. Chair and member, the Emirates Airline, they were interested in doing a direct flight to the Americas. They were looking at Panama for a while, and we have been in some discussions with them. So with the developments in the aviation industry, it is possible for airlines in the Middle East, once they have the correct equipment, to do direct flights to Port of Spain and also to NR Robinson. However, as the general manager explained, air service agreements are really very important prerequisites to facilitate that.
Thanks. I just want to ask one more follow-up. The issue is, and I'll give it a brief background. When I was in Ghana, we had a chamber there, Caribbean chamber, and they were looking at having direct flights because you have a widening and enriching African population, and they're looking at vacation tourism and so on, honeymoon destinations in the Caribbean. But the issue of getting a U.S. visa is a significant deterrent for many of them. And if there were to be a direct hop from Emirates, they don't need visas to go to the United Arab Emirates. Then it becomes now attractive. So I think if you get any advances on that, if you can supply the committee with some information in writing so that we can see how this can be advanced. Thank you.
Please, Senator Henry.
Yes. Morning again, everyone. I saw in your weaknesses, among your weaknesses, and something you mentioned in your opening comment about inefficient design and poor quality that is causing you some grief. I just wondered could you elaborate on what are some of the main challenges? I mean, it's all well and good to say that it's poor quality, but we'd like to know a little bit more about what are the real issues.
That's briefly. From a practical point of view, the North Terminal was in fact built out with equipment that is not necessarily consistent with international airports. In a lot of places, we are faced with having to deal with concrete board rather than a firm material. That's only one thing. The other thing is in terms of the question of the terminal was never really designed properly for in-transit passengers. And we are trying to, in fact, do hub and that kind of thing. We have a real challenge. We have had, and I feel a sense of concern for our Caribbean neighbors and Guyana, for instance, where, in fact, there is a large scale in transit, but we don't have proper in-transit facilities to deal with it. And we have had to, in fact, do some actions, which, in fact, is not really actions that passengers like. All right, so those are some of the challenges. Yeah, well, yeah. But the point I want to make is that we don't throw our hands in the air and say that, in fact, we're not going to work with it. We find solutions to try to deal with some of the challenges. But ultimately, we would prefer a facility that, in fact, really deals and ensures that modern aviation and as the member suggested, hub-type activity is possible. All right? I wouldn't say we are far from that, member. I'm saying that, in fact, we have put our heads together in terms of the expertise we have in aviation, and we have worked and tried to find solutions to deal with the challenges. Ultimately, however, we have to look at renewing the facilities.
The other area I saw listed as a weakness was in terms of the impending expenditure in face of limited resources. I mean, again, could you elaborate on that? What are your big ticket items that's going to keep you awake at night?
Remember, we try to ensure we have nothing keeping us awake at night. We can't afford that in terms of this environment. All right. While we are on 24/7, we want to ensure that this question of safety and security and compliance is extremely important. And I want to make that point because I have people from IQ right now, IATA, FA, monitoring what is happening in terms of this meeting to see whether or not the airport's authorities' facility is in fact consistent and ensuring that they will bring their aircraft and their gauge in terms of our facility. We are audited every day a pilot comes down. Every day a pilot lands, they're auditing us. And they're responding back to the head office, well, you know, PIACO, ANR, something are right. We have to ensure things are always right. Right? So and one of the points I want to make is that what we will in fact ensure, and we will in fact, in the balancing act, attempt to ensure this question of safety and security and compliance with those standard and recommended practices of ICAO are in fact maintained.
Just before I move on, the costs, what are your, in terms of the, what I wanted to get at was the compliance costs.
All right, we could talk to some of the things that we have planned over the next 5 years or 3 in terms of the capital expenditure program. And I would want my manager engineering services to talk to that.
Good morning, Chairman, member. As a result of the pavement management study recently done in 2013, it generated a number of pavement issues that we would have had at both PIACO and ANR. As a result, we have estimates for a number of rehabilitation strategies for the next 5 years, and they're of the order of 400 million for PIACO and 84 for ANR. What we have been doing as management, we have been prioritizing and phasing the projects over time, balancing, as the general manager said, with recurrent expenditure to maintain the facilities in accordance with IQ. So what we have done is we have 2 major programs for the pavement study, one for ANR, one for PIACO, and we have been phasing them over time since the conclusion of the study.
Okay. Yeah, okay.
Anna, sorry, I bypassed.
Good morning again. Mr. General Manager, in your opening statement, you noted that your authority is responding to stakeholders. Tobago stakeholders have been clamoring over the years about the situation with the car park, and the authority has been slow in responding. Could you just give me some information on that, please?
Okay. The Tobago situation in terms of the current car park, and here we're talking about the public car park, right? I just want to give a little bit of a historical background. And before I go to historical, I want to make the point is that the Airports Authority has done some work within recent time with respect to the car park, and the intention is to ensure that in Tobago we have a paid car park. That has been a challenge for us in Tobago. In 2003, I'm advised, because I wasn't there, the records, there was an attempt to ensure that we put in place a paid car park in Tobago because, as with all international airports, it's a question of the user charges for use of the facilities. What happened then is that, in fact, everybody moved from parking in the car park in the airport and they went to Store Bay. They went and parked all over in various places. So that has been a challenge for us in terms of the car park. The intention is, however, the work that we are doing in terms of PIACO right now in terms of the car park, where we're going to be introducing a pay on foot system. Yes. Yes. People are parked. Yeah. It's not only rental, it's a whole range, yes. But remember what we are doing, and that's what I'm talking about in terms of the development work. There's going to be 2 facilities, one where we had the former lead-on site for the work, and also the current car park. Some work is going to be done in terms of ensuring that we put up bollards around and properly secure the car park and ensure that the car park is a car park for the public and it's a paid car park. That work is well advanced, and that should be finished before June this year. Yeah. Yes.
Could you share some of those response and also how you have included the ANR in that response as well in terms of technological upgrade?
Yeah, thank you, member. And the same issue with respect to the car parking, the intention is also to include, right now we are doing work at Piaco first with respect to upgrading the car parks, utilizing the technologies that are available in all airports. In terms of the pay on foot system, that is the same process we intend to also replicate at A&R Robinson. We have in the ICT systems that we have at Piaco as a backbone are the same systems that we intend, and some are already at A&R, but we also intend to ensure that they are replicated at A&R in terms of things such as your kiosk system, right? And I could point to the fact that the Airports Authority is working with National Security right now and the Immigration Division with respect to the introduction of immigration kiosks, and that will also be at Piaco and A&R. The intention is also to introduce, and by mid this year, what we call outgoing kiosks. So you don't have to, right now when you're leaving, you remember you have to in fact sign off this form in this immigration form internationally. There will be no need for that. There will be e-gates, as you see in other international airports. That will be introduced both at Piaco and A&R Robinson. A&R and yes, in fact, we have seen. I'm advised that 5 of the machines are already at immigration in Piaco, and machines will be brought to at A&R Robinson in a short space of time. By June, the system is supposed to be in place at both airports.
Tobago is poised to drive tourism, but when people come to Tobago, they often have to suffer a number of inconveniences. And one was the baggage, the way the baggage has been handled. It took the authority years to get it right. And then when they finally, especially on the domestic side, when they finally installed the conveyor, the same day installed it, it stopped working the same day. I traveled the day it happened.
Well, I'm not aware. There could be the teething problems in terms of a new machine. Yes.
We don't experience those inconveniences in Piaco. But to me, the feeling and the sense is that anything goes to Tobago. Is that a correct assumption?
Remember, that is certainly not a correct assumption. We, the Airports Authority, view the Tobago facilities and our relationship with the Tobago House of Assembly is very important, right? We may have challenges, but I want to say that the challenges we have is not directed at Tobago at all. It's a challenge that we face at both facilities, right? We have been working with the THA with respect to what is required in terms of Tobago, in terms of the development for the facilities, and we will continue to do that.
Just one more, that's it. I'm really excited about the plans for the new terminal, and I want to commend you all for pushing that project along. How do you intend to commercialize it so it becomes sustainable?
The same model that we intend to operate at Piaco with respect to the business focus, ensuring that the non-aeronautical aspect of the airport is developed to its fullest, is what we intend to do at A&R Robinson. It made me a culture change because to a large extent, comparable to the car park, there was a situation where the user of the facilities at A&R Robinson did not expect that they would have to pay for certain things. But it has come to that, and it's what is done in modern international airports. The airports utilizing the facilities itself, it must pay for itself. The user charges approach in accordance with International Civil Aviation Organization requirements is what are we going to be doing at both facilities.
Please.
So would you go to do consultations so the public will be aware that, this is what is required, this is a new direction that we have to go in, to prepare Tobagonians for that?
Stakeholder plan to address what you're talking about, ma'am. Okay.
is responsible for the project, the airport project in Tobago?
Chairman, yeah, we have been designated by the Cabinet Ministers as the executing agency for the project.
So you are the executing agency for the project, Airports Authority of Trinidad and Tobago. Okay, I'll come back with some questions.
Chair, I'm not sure if to continue on the question you asked. You can proceed wherever you. All right, just to go on the question that he asked. In your submission, you indicated that you didn't have a full project unit. What is the strategy for a project of that magnitude, and how does the airport ensure that they have full control of the execution of this particular project, this large project?
Thank you, Member. We indicated in our submissions that in the case of when in fact there's a need for a large-scale project, we put in place a structure in terms of a project management unit, in fact, oversee what is happening in terms of the project. And that's the intention is for us to, in fact, use that approach. That is the same approach that was done in the past in terms of some of the large-scale projects that were executed at the airport. The fact is that our primary role as an airports authority is to, as we said, provide the safe and secure aviation services. So we may not have necessarily a standing project management unit, but in the case where we need to do large-scale complex project, we pull together a team combining in-house aviation specialists and outsource resources to make sure that we effectively manage the project.
I understand that. But because of the last model that you had, you speak about some of the deficiencies that the airport was left with in terms of the large project with the development, in terms of not having a proper in-transit facility and that kind of stuff. What is the control is what I'm trying to ask. What is the control that the airport authority has in terms of doing this? Not just outsourcing someone, but actually having the control to ensure that what is done is in accordance to what the airport requires and desires.
The first thing, Member, is that in fact we started with developing a proper master plan before we moved to the project. That was not done in the past. The master plan would in fact provide the necessary prerequisites to properly design the project. That wasn't done in the past. The input of the aviation specialists with respect to developing the facilities, that was absent in the past. This is learning from those mistakes and also working together and having assist some of our Caribbean neighbors, including Argyle, St. Vincent, in terms of the development. We feel that now we have the expertise in terms of developing a project like that.
All right, thank you. I don't want to go too much on that. My question was your audited financials. What is the challenge of completing your audited financials? Because based on my record, the last one submitted to Parliament was 2012, if I'm correct. What is the challenge of having this up to date, and how does that deficiency affect your strategic plan in terms of moving forward?
Based upon our records, the last audited financials would have been submitted to Parliament is 2013. At present, we are in fact completing 2014 to 2016 through the Auditor General's Office, and PricewaterhouseCoopers in fact is right now unseen, near to completion of the 14 to 16. But the challenge in terms of the completion time really is a challenge which is out of the hands of the Airports Authority, so to speak. We comply as best we could in terms of the regulation, but the Auditor General Office is in fact the office that is responsible for completing the audits, financial audits of the Airports Authority.
So then can I then ask the Auditor General's Office, what is the challenge of this?
The Auditor General's department is currently understaffed by approximately 50% in auditing resources. So over the last maybe 2 years, we've been contracting out audit work with our reviews being done with our quality control standards. So I believe it was done in the PAC reports, but up to today, we have a 50% deficit in all auditing posts at the Auditor General's Department. Mr. Chair, the matter has remained the same for the last maybe 3 to 4 years.
Bodies in the Auditor General's department?
The recruiting agency has not been able to fill those vacancies to today's date.
That because we're going to take some kind of action, at least in terms of notification of the relevant minister of this particular matter. And this is a matter for the Public Service Commission, is that correct? Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Complete your, the statement of the general manager related to audited accounts. Yeah.
As the general manager indicated, the 2013 accounts were the last accounts signed by the Auditor General on the 2nd of November, or November last year, 2nd of November, I believe it was. Sorry, 31st of November, last year November, sorry. The 14, 15, 16 accounts have been audited to about 50% completed by our private auditors who we contracted out to do. What we do at 2 intervals, we look at the work they do and we comment on it and we liaise with them what we would like to see done. Sampling size, materiality limits, we look at the work they do and we comment on it as we make payments. We expect by June this year, July for the latest, for those accounts to be in, the 14, 15, 16 accounts. The 2017 accounts have not been received as yet.
Just based on the preliminary review that has been done, can you share with us some of the things that may have been red flagged that would have been sent back to the airport authority, please?
Okay, the preliminary work done has not raised any red flags as yet, because they did the basic auditing work, calculations, analyses, review of board minutes. The real meat of the audit will come into the second half, which we have not reviewed as yet.
This question is just trying to figure out how does this affect your strat plan?
Could I, member, could I, before I answer that, provide some feedback in terms of our side, in terms of what is happening in terms of the audit 14 to 16? Two things that has in fact been raised by the auditors, not challenges, so to speak, but in fact things that needs to be addressed. One is the question of the Caribbean Airlines debt. And the second one is the issue where at Piaco, the lands that comprise the airport estates that are in fact described in the Act has been properly vested in the Airports Authority. At A&R Robinson, the investing has not been completed, right? And that was flagged as an issue that in fact we need to in fact address by the auditors, those two things. Coming back now to the issue of the impact, member, of what is happening in terms of our strategic plan, we would want to suggest that in fact that whatever is happening in terms of the delay, in terms of the provision of our financials, doesn't directly affect our strategic plan. Where it may affect us, however, is that the Airports Authority is looking to go and operate as any other business. So it means that we will be talking about raising finances. It means that financial organizations may very well want to say, well, what is happening? We have a challenge that I want to point to immediately to in terms of the issue, which is the SEC challenge, because one of the regulators we have is the SEC, because we have bonds on our books, bonds that were in fact loans that were in fact generated in the past for capital expenditure programs. So we are reporting issuer on the by way of the Securities Exchange Commission. The regulations for the Securities Exchange Commission require that you provide your annual reports within a specific period of the end of the financial year. So we have been in breach of that requirement. In fact, we have been fined in the past by the SEC with respect to this. Is an issue that we have raised in the past with the line ministry. And it's an issue that, in fact, we may very want the support of this committee to assist us, because it will continue. Right? The SEC operates very strictly. And as an issuer, you are late in filing, and I'm talking here about my audited financial statements. You are fined.
That's two very short comments. That's a very critical point there, and the committee knows that. In terms of CAL, right, just two last points. In terms of CAL, has there been any discussion in moving forward, besides the 190-something million that they currently have for you? Has there been any discussion in terms of moving forward that from current to not moving forward, the adjustment of their rentals be practiced so that the debt doesn't continually increase?
I could point to the fact that we have raised this in the past with Carl, but I really want to point to the fact that within recent time, the new board and the new CEO has indicated that they will be sitting down with the Airports Authority to come to some kind of settlement arrangement with respect to that. So we look forward to that very feverishly.
And the last point, you spoke about two major forms of revenue, right? The aeronautical and the non-aeronautical, and you being sustainable in terms of recurrent. And you only request loans for projects, and I listened to your projects person at the back there. You talk about, I think, 400 million, and I think 80 in Tobago or something like that. What is the strategy in terms of quantify the strategy in terms of time, getting some of these projects realized, and how does it impact on airports' business profitability?
Well, first, the issue with respect to the projects. What we attempt to ensure that we prioritize those projects those things that are required, given as the engineering manager engineering service indicated, those projects that are in fact required, we have in fact scheduled them to be done. We have scheduled them based upon our internally generated cash flow. And I had this discussion with the chairman. At some point in time, there would be a need for a significant capital injection to do some of the projects that were required, perhaps not over the next 3 years, but the next 4 or 5 years. In terms of the issue of our profitability, and that's one of the things that I wanted to perhaps talk to this committee about. The profitability, the critical metrics in terms of profitability in the Airports Authority must be the issue of looking at our earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. And it's comparable to what happens in other organizations, such as an ICT organization. The depreciation levels that we have on our assets are pretty high, because that's what happens in terms of normal accounting. We intend, as we indicated in terms of the submissions, to commence a valuation of our assets sometime later this year. So that in itself, too, will in fact affect the depreciation rates, because we expect, and I'm not an accountant, but we expect, utilizing, what is this, IAS 16, that the values of some of those assets will go up. So the depreciation rate in fact, is going to be increasing. So that is one of the things from a purely financial point of view that we have to be mindful of. The other thing I want to put, however, on the table is that we have also benchmarked what is happening in other airports, airports which are comparable to us in terms of the passenger movement. We benchmark all the time. And that's one of the things that we could point to in terms of the staff, the managers that I have. They spend time doing that. The critical metric really for in an airport where, in fact, the passenger movement is 1 to 5 million. And here we're talking about, based upon looking at the Airport Economics 2017 report of the Airport Council International. The critical metric really is the earnings before interest, taxes, and depreciation, because there seems to be a relationship between passenger movement and profitability, even in those airports that have been privatized. Airports Authority, when we look at when we benchmark with what is happening in those other airports, we are comparable. But we don't want to be comparable, we want to be better. So we're going to spend some time, and that's why our strategic plan is done like this. And what we have done too is developed this strategic plan in terms of the blueprint, but we intend to ensure that we drill down, member, and I'm talking to that in terms of one of the questions that a member raised in the issue of the question of how will we deal with the aeronautical revenue side of it. We intend to drill down and ensure we compare and benchmark with what is happening in terms of best practices in other airports, looking at their governance models, because a lot of airports have gone away from the public sector ownership and gone to the private sector ownership. We are in the model of a public sector airport, but we intend to be efficient as possible, utilizing that model.
Do you have additional questions now that you've heard the responses?
Questions, just general comments?
Yes, please.
Well, the Auditor General is concerned about the accounts receivable figure with the Caribbean Airlines, as you said before, which went from 129 million in 2012 to 210 million, according to the documents here, in 2018, a 63% increase on the management of that debt, and if it's collectible at all. And on their books as well, it's an 8.9 million receivable from BWIA, which to all intents and purposes should be there.
I could talk to that. What happened is that when BWIA went out of operation, there was an agreement by corporation sold that BWIA pays 75% of the debt, right? And that remainder is the remainder of the debt that's still on the books. Yeah, yes. Yeah.
Okay, just the assets have not been revalued since 1993. That's 25 years ago. So we're interested in insurance coverage. What insurance coverage do you have on your assets? Because the equipment, the facility, are we trading on 1993 figures?
Did I talk to that?
Yeah, but you started by saying
yes. Later this year. But even before that, in terms of insurance purposes, we have in fact revalued our assets for insurance purposes. No way the international reinsurers would have allowed that. And they use, of course, they use different methods of valuation from the IAS 16. But for valuation purposes, in fact, it was done 2 years ago, and the evaluator is in fact right now doing the valuation for insurance purposes.
Just 2 more points, Mr. Chairman. We noted the differences in the management letter responses and the written submissions to the PAC. If you look at both documents, discrepancy. Yes. So we just noted them, and it speaks to the integrity of the information provided at the first ML response to the client, to the private auditor. The 2013 audit report was submitted on the 28th of November last year. The 2014, 15, 16 audits are 50% complete in the last stages now. We would want to comment on the contents of it because the management letters have not been issued, which will be the final document. And on behalf of the Auditor General, thank you for your courtesies to attend and prepare for this meeting.
The Auditor General has raised an important one, which is that there is a gap of credibility really between what is stated in the management letters to the Auditor General and also what is recorded in response to questions from this particular committee. And would you like to explain that and help us to reconcile the discrepancies?
Chairman, you could help me in terms of the discrepancies. We're talking about what section? We're talking about in the issue of...
Yeah, okay. Go ahead.
One of the discrepancies were the bank reconciliations, where the management, the response to the management letter from the airport authority dated the 21st of July 2017 indicated that they had some late responses, some of which would have been a month late, whereas in the responses to the committee, the reconciliations were timely, almost real time based on the online input that you have. That was one of them.
But there's a more general one, which is that there is the issue of basically flagging a number of deficiencies that need to be corrected in the airports authority. And there is in reportage to us that a lot of these things have been attended to. And the issue really is whether in fact they have been attended to in the way that you have, and whether you have now plugged the holes and the discrepancies and the deficiencies within the organization to the extent that you state that this is so. And I think that is the main problem I have, not just the individual details of the issues.
Okay. Chairman, wherever the issues were in fact indicated by the audit, the Airports Authority has moved to in fact respond and, as you indicated, plug and to correct, to make sure there are systems in place to correct what has been identified by the audit, by the external auditor. Right? And we stand by that. And
Mr. Chairman, only during the subsequent audits we can verify these changes done and work with the authority to bring these things in line. Thank you.
Another. Could I ask, Senator, please, would you ask you?
Thank you, Chair.
I'm going to come to you after because you've quietly listened. And
Chair,
okay.
Be assured.
But I just want to prepare you to respond to some of the issues that you've been hearing in relation to your oversight role as the Ministry of Works and Infrastructure.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've listened to your discussion about benchmarking passenger movements, which is very good, as well as your business focus and how you're going to make PIACO, both ENR and PIACO, sustainable. But what I fail to understand is if we are going to approach Emirates and all these international airlines to come to Trinidad and Tobago to be a hub, how is it that we're going to do that when we can't deal with basic things like when international flights come down, customs take over 4 hours sometimes to clear passengers? We all remember November 13, 2017, when only 2 officers was on duty and hours persons were left there unable to just exit the airport. And how is it that we're going to deal with this situation if we're trying to be sustainable and a business-focused airline or airport?
Remember, what I want to point to, as a part of the benchmarking exercise too, we looked at how other airports deal with their border control, because it's a challenge not only for Trinidad and Tobago, it's a challenge internationally. Miami International, for instance, and we feel everything is all nice in terms of that, have pointed to the factors that they have a significant challenge in dealing with their border control. The way of dealing with that is to ensure that the relationship with the division itself, but also the relationship with national security is of the highest level. And we have been doing that within recent time. And that's why I could point to the fact that the immigration challenge is going to be dealt with in terms of the introduction of the incoming chaos. And I want to say that the relationship on the ground with respect to these entities has not been a relationship that the Airports Authority could say is a bad relationship. We intend to work on that relationship. In the past, and I want to give you an example of in the past, before the Act was amended, the representative of all these agencies were in fact on the Airports Authority board. That is not the case right now. So what we have had to do is we have had to ensure that we, at the level of the General Manager's Office, at the level of the operations managers at both airports, work very closely with immigration and customs. But there are challenges, and I'm not going to say it's nice and hunky-dory, but we will continue to work on it.
Okay, but how difficult is it for Christmas time, Easter time, these key holidays, to have an increase? How is it going to impact on your costs? Because it is a disaster if 3 international airlines land. I'm one of those who pray that no other international flight is coming in when I come in, because it's just a disaster. And I would not like this model to follow into Tobago, because it's not doing well in Trinidad. So I hope you can understand, how hard is it to, okay, one model it is that you are following right now, that to make sure that we don't have passengers taking at least like 4 hours, 5 hours to clear, and that is to deal with the immigration officers now. Yes, you have your border control, but what measures are you putting in place? Because if it is a case that, because from your submission, I looked at you had back pay issues, and I hope that was not the issue in that particular case.
I just want to distinguish the issue between, when I talk about border control, I'm talking about customs and immigration.
Yeah,
the back pay challenges that the airports have was in terms of our security officers. That's a different thing. The immigration challenge that we're talking about, I want to indicate that by June that should be cleared up, because there's going to be 12 additional incoming kiosks and 5 in Tobago.
So you're giving us a mandate that by June 2018, we should not have any issues.
That is the plan.
The commitment.
Yeah, that's the plan.
All right. But what I really wanted to ask you about was maintenance. You did mention that you're having maintenance issues, and I'm not sure if I got your figure right. Is it that you spend about $142 million on maintenance, and is it a per year, annual?
Let me ask the financial control, because I don't know where the figure 142 million came from. So the financial controller could perhaps assist.
Our repairs and maintenance is approximately $22 million a year. The $142 million is our depreciation.
Senator, to you, $22 million a year approximately.
Okay, $22 million per year for maintenance. And I heard also that you were saying that this is a growing figure because this airport was built in 2001 and there's challenges. And I just wanted to understand what it is, the challenges in relation to cost and maintenance. Is it something that we do every year? Because I didn't see any audited verification reports in relation to how you would be maintaining the airports of Trinidad and Tobago.
The reason we anticipate an increase in maintenance costs is because we're talking about an aging facility. And that was just a broad indication, a broad rationale. The figures and stuff like that, we haven't put it. But I could ask the facilities, not the engineering managers, to talk a little bit about the question of the maintenance of our facilities and what we are talking about.
Okay, sorry. Right. Because we have an aging facility, what we have been doing over time is that we have been assessing the various major components. We have chillers, we have the air conditioning systems, we have the escalators, elevators, just to name a few. And what we have been doing is that we have been looking at the life cycle of these equipment and assessing the age of other infrastructure like the pavement, and doing rehabilitation, purchasing new for all these equipment over time, just to also balance the act between maintenance as well as recurrent expenditure. So what we do, we look at the life cycle of all the major installations and prioritize them over time so that we reach a point where everything is at maximum.
So what is your recurrent expenditure?
Current expenditure for what, member?
Just mentioned, she said,
in terms of maintenance.
Yeah, she said that they're making sure they match their recurrent expenditure with your aging facility.
I said manage.
Yes. So what is it right now? What is your present recurring expenditure in relation what you're managing for your aged assets?
We point to $22 million as the maintenance cost annually.
So you have $22 million plus spare parts for aged assets as well as replacement equipment. That is where we're at right now?
Yes, there are certain installations that are at nearing or at replacement right now.
The maintenance section have a budget in which they work with?
All our departments actually have a budget that they work with in terms of an annual budget that is in fact submitted to the line ministry for approval.
Willing to share that figure with us?
Let me ask the financial controller if in fact let me give you how real this is, because tomorrow we have board meeting. The budget that we've presented for the next year is in fact going to the budget to the board for approval before we submit it to the line ministry. I don't know if the financial controller would have had the budget present, or we could in fact provide that to you, this committee, as is required.
You can provide it in writing if you cannot provide it now, please. Thank. All right, I have a couple of questions before I go to the permanent secretary, though, which is that the general manager said that he needed help with 3 particular issues that he identified. The issues having to do with SEC compliance. What particular, just bear in mind, I'm going to give you the 3 and you can respond. What particular help do you need with that? What do you need from this committee or from your ministry? Secondly, you have an issue in which all your capital expenditure is actually provided by the PSIP or by the state in terms of a project grant, because you only deal with operational expenses. Yet you have property around you which can be monetized. And I don't know what you are going to do with that, but I mean, I would suspect that that is one way towards economic viability of the airport. And the third issue is that you mentioned something about you needed help to maintain your profitability, and that had to do with the accounting issues having to do with depreciation. Could you kind of pull these 3 things together and tell us what exactly is the support you need in order to deal with these matters?
With respect to the SEC, we have been fined for having not been able to comply with the SEC in this context, but in other contexts too, related to changes in the material changes as in fact interpreted by the SEC. The SEC interprets any change in terms of the board and any change in terms of the executive as a material change, and they were required to in fact be advised within, I think it's within 3 days of that change. We have not been able to comply with that in certain circumstances because the Airports Authority itself may not necessarily know of the change within a period of 3 days. But they're very strict with respect to that. So that's the first thing. The second thing, of course, is what I raised on the issue of the accounts.
This is a governance issue between government or ministry or cabinet with the Airports Authority as a corporate entity.
Yeah. And it's something that has been going on for a period of time, because way back 2008 we were fined on that issue. So that's the first thing. The second thing, of course, is the issue with respect to the accounts, which is the bigger one, because the fines for that is even bigger. Our recommendation, and perhaps I could ask the legal advisor to talk about but our recommendation in terms of solution to that is, one, either the Airports Authority be delisted as an issuer under the SEC's provision. Why? Because of the fact it's not the traditional kind of public issuer. Those debts were in fact government guaranteed loans. The Airports Authority really were the beneficiary of those loans. It's on the books of the Airports Authority, but from the point of view of investors in the SEC, there is not a challenge in itself of us not reporting the fact that a board member resigned at a particular day within a 3-day period. So what the Act was intended to cure in terms of the SEC legislation, it really didn't cover the issues like what happens at the Airports Authority. Yes.
On these issues, could we have in writing what the problem is and what is the proposed solution,
yes,
so that we can speak to them?
With respect to the second challenge, member, with the capital expenditure, I just want to make something clear. We pointed to the fact that the Airports Authority was the beneficiary of public sector investment funding and also government guaranteed loans in the past. But I also want to point to the fact that in fact within recent time, utilizing internally generated funds, we have in fact been generating capital expenditure projects at the Airports Authority. All right? We are mindful, of course, of the economic challenges of the central government and the cash flow of the Airports Authority when it's permitted. And we have met with the PS, and the PS has pointed to us in the past that we have the cash flow to do certain things. So we in fact have been doing those CapEx projects on the basis of the cash flow that we have. Yep. What the chairman has pointed to me, however, for future, when the finances of the corporation soul improves, we may very well want to come to the corporation soul for some kind of capital injections for the renewal of the assets.
Well, why don't you focus the other way then?
Right.
Which is how you can monetize the assets under your control.
Right.
In order to become a self-sufficient, self-propelling, self-sustainable entity, because as you said, this is done all over the world, you know.
And that is...
In Panama, the airport is a business.
Yes.
I mean, hence, once you have the freedom to deal with the assets, you can do certain things. All right?
Totally agree.
You look like you want to respond, so please do.
Yes, I want to respond. Totally agree, concur with you. Hence, the strategic plan, where the focus is to ensure we grow the revenue positions, and we also deal with the question of controlling our expenditure to do what you would talk about.
I have a couple of questions on the Tobago airport situation. There's a $500 million project. You say you are the entity in charge of the project. So does that mean that the Airports Authority will be basically procuring the project and in fact managing the project as a part of its portfolio and basically responsible for the completion and the handover of the airport?
Yeah, that's our understanding as indicated by the minister.
Okay. Are you going to be operating under the procurement rules of the current procurement legislation?
That's the intention, Minister.
Okay. Could I ask I want to get some comments from the Permanent Secretary and the Chairman at this point. Well, I'll ask the Permanent Secretary first. Permanent Secretary, you've heard a number of issues related to the Airports Authority from the General Manager. And some of the issues have to do with perceived constraints by the Airports Authority. And some of the issues, I'm sure, have generated concerns in your mind about the oversight function of the Ministry of Works and Transport. Would you care to make a statement or two or give your point of view on this particular matter?
Thank you, Chair. In terms of the oversight of the Ministry of Works and Transport for the Airports Authority, we try to operate within a general framework. We take a overarching mandate from the Vision 2030 document and the areas in that document which have been identified for completion and for implementation. At the same time, we have a fair understanding.
Can you identify what those might be?
In the Vision 2030 document, it speaks basically to the improvement of the overall air transportation framework. It speaks specifically to the undertaking of the airport terminal in Tobago. It also speaks to general upgrade of the Piarco terminal. So we have that framework, but it speaks on a wider basis to issues related to tourism, to issues related to the environment. All of those issues we take in terms of the overarching framework as we look at the operations of the Airports Authority. We then drill down in terms of two main pieces of documentation, being the Airports Authority Act, and within that act, the requirements the ministry is supposed to undertake. Yes, Chair? I thought you were going to ask me a question. No? Right. Now, outside of that as well, the Airports Authority, in terms of its program of works, they do present to the ministry from a recurrent perspective as well as from a capital or a public sector investment perspective. The recurrent aspect we seek to review because it also goes before the Standing Finance Committee. And in that context, we review the operations of the authority. In terms of the capital expenditure, as the General Manager would have indicated, it is a common fact that major capital expenditure for quite a number of airports worldwide is in some way or form or fashion underpinned by government assistance. And that has happened in the past with the Airports Authority. And based on some of the areas that we are going into at this present time, it is going to be a requirement, and we are aware of that, and we are working with the Airports Authority. But at the same point in time, we have been discussing closely with the Airports Authority that where we have projects that can be undertaken from internally generated funds, that is the way that we need to go, as he mentioned, based on discussions that we've had. So in that area, we are actually closely looking at how the expenditure of the authority is put into play. At the same point in time, the Airports Authority, the General Manager, did speak to the development of a master plan for Crown Point, and there was a master plan for Piarco, which is also being upgraded, I'm informed. And that master plan, it speaks to the build-out of the lands of the Airports Authority and it speaks the build out in a fashion to allow for an increase in non-aeronautical revenue and for utilization of the Airports Authority assets, land assets. And I know that, I'm aware that that is in train. So we are looking at that with the Airports Authority.
Looking at in terms of ownership of the airport?
At Piaco, I'm advised it's more than 400 and something acres. At A&R Robinson, I'm not sure the acreage offhand. I'll have to get that to you. The figures I will get to this committee.
Go ahead.
In terms of that, we are also aware of the vesting issue that was mentioned by the general manager for the, in terms of the Tobago build-out. And I am aware that there are discussions being undertaken by the Airports Authority and the THA, in particular as we move forward with the new A&R Robinson International Airport. Now, there were some at this point in time, we are at the stage where it has been stated that we are going to an international agency for some of the preliminary works, looking at in terms of the development aspect, and we will be looking at a bolt financing arrangement for the Crown Point International Airport. Now, this project...
Will this central government be involved in the financing, or the THA as well, or THA alone, or is it a central government project with the execution agency being the Airports Authority?
The way it has been identified, it is a project under the Ministry of Works and Transport, but it is also a project that is directly being overlooked by the Ministry of Finance as well. There is, in fact, an Airports Oversight Committee that has been formulated, which has on it, it is chaired by the Ministry of Finance official, the official in charge of the public-private sector investment public-private partnership, yes, I know I got that wrong. And it has on it representation from the Ministry of Works and Transport, representation from the Airports Authority, and representation from the THA. So that is that oversight committee, and the Airports Authority is identified as the implementing agency for the project. So that is the basic oversight framework that has been developed for that project at this time. Oh, yes, right. So in terms of, I did take note of the issue, the SEC issues, and we have had some discussions on this because, as Mr. Newton had indicated, the time frames for notification at times, it does prove to be a challenge. So we are working with the Airports Authority on that area. The Airports Authority has, in the main, I can say, provided the ministry with the necessary documentation for review, which we have been undertaking over time. We continue to monitor via a number of pieces of legislation, documentation that's provided. And there is a mechanism where, as well, the minister meets with the board of the Airports Authority in terms of the provision of general and direct and specific direction.
One issue with regard to the airport having to do with scale. You know, you mentioned border control, and it's a big concept and applied to countries everywhere. But I mean, comparing the Miami airport to Piaco, I think, I mean, you have a scale gap that is really quite significant. And I mean, this is really a follow-up to the question Senator Ramkisoon raised about managing a flight when it gets on the ground. I mean, in any given day, you know that there are how many airlines or airplanes that are going to come to the ground and what time they're going to come, given earliness or tardiness. And therefore, these are manageable entities within and I don't think it's a 24-hour period. I think it might be a 17 or 18-hour period. And it seems to me that these are of manageable proportions in an airport like Piarco. And if, with proper planning and deployment of resources, this thing can work like clockwork if it's effectively managed. And I cannot understand, I mean, and I share her frustration about it, why something as simple as that, which is predictable and manageable unless there's a crisis, cannot be done efficiently and effectively in the airport. Managing immigration, managing customs, managing the flow of passengers, managing security. I mean, these are everyday matters. And as I said, the issue of scale is significant. This is a small airport, relatively. And if we're going to move to being a hub and try to deal with those demands that are going to accrue, and we cannot even manage the few airplanes that we have coming here now. I mean, BWI, I don't think they fly more, besides the Tobago run, I don't think they fly more than 6 or 7 planes out of the airport a day. And I mean, these things are very manageable. What could possibly be the problem in managing something like this well?
Chair, I see the general manager looked across at me. I thought I'd take it.
You are going to answer that question?
It looks so. It looks so. Or at least I'm going to try.
Well, I thought the general manager or the chairman might answer that question. I don't see how you can understand it, quite frankly.
I
don't see how you can answer it.
I don't think I am meant to answer it. I think I'm meant to lend a platform for them to answer it. Yeah.
Well, if you're going to do that, then fine.
I'll try. And I think the platform that probably I'm being asked to lend is that the general manager spoke in his opening statement about managing stakeholders. And I believe when he spoke to that management of stakeholders, what he was alluding to is that he does not have control of certain agencies. And that what we are speaking to here is really coordination of agencies whose executive may be external to the airports authority. So to break it down and not sound as if I'm skirting the issue, what it's speaking to here is that there is a need for us to have better coordination with the external agency. But not just better coordination, but also an understanding that these agencies also have challenges that we may not be aware of. So that we may not just have to deal with the fact that we need to alert those agencies that today we are going to be having 3 flights, but for those agencies to be able to respond to that information, which I'm not sure that the general manager and they may be able to do. I can say that what we can seek to do is to take this on at maybe another level, to try to understand and to see if we can bring more resources to bear to the issue. I can also suggest that I note, though, that the Airports Authority is seeking to combat some of that with putting in technological platforms that may mitigate the problem, if I'm understanding it properly.
Senator Ramkisoon wants to ask a question before you respond.
Yeah, before you interview. Saying all of that, it really does, well, these are internal issues for different areas. but it really shows that we cannot reach a level of growing our business or really having a bigger business model if we can't solve these basic issues. Because we can't just say, well, this is X issue and they don't have the resources and they can't respond. If we really want to engage international airlines, we will not be able to do that if we can't solve basic things, because no passenger wants to fly and have to wait in a hub for 5 hours.
Just briefly, Chairman and member. The Airports Authority is the landlord of the facilities, yes. And we, in fact, are responsible and seen by the world as being responsible. In terms of coordinating with some of these agencies, and that's why I want to choose my words very well, because I work with them on a day-to-day basis. But the point is that in meeting some of these challenges, what the Airports Authority has as its basis of doing things is moral suasion. We cannot command and control border control agencies. We use moral suasion. We use the institution of the Airport Council as much as possible to explain how important it is that they operate there as efficiently as possible, and the impact it has not only on the Airports Authority, but Trinidad and Tobago, as the member indicated. But beyond that, in terms of getting the kind of results we want, it's beyond the Airports Authority.
Okay, Chairman, would you?
Chairman, there is very little that I can add to the efforts that we have contemplated. In the short time we have been there, one of the things that rose to the level of the board's consideration was how can we make all stakeholders at the airport to see themselves as part of one family, trying to produce one output for all the customers that pass through there. But again, it has come back to the moral suasion. It has come back to seeing ourselves as part of one whole, trying to deliver for the country as a whole. But really, because these stakeholders are outside our direct control, the two things we have done is to lead by example in terms of our own performance, and also to have that council work more effectively to deliver to the one customer.
But from my understanding, I might be wrong because it's just experience, we don't have a problem with air traffic control, do we? I mean, that is a very efficient and effective operation, because if they're not efficient or effective, you're going to have crashes and people will die. Okay, so are you saying then, without me trying to compromise you in your relationship with your stakeholders in the airport, that the immigration does not have that level of efficiency and effectiveness, and that customs does not have that level of efficiency and effectiveness?
Yeah, I'm not going to, you said you were not going to compromise my relationship with my stakeholders, but your question may directly do that. What I'm saying is that let us be guided by what is in the public domain, as opposed to what we have to say. Are there occasions on which the instances that are referred to by the member have been attributed to one entity versus another? Are there instances where they're saying that we don't have this stakeholder present or that stakeholder present? I mean, those things speak for themselves. We are not going to be saying what the situation is. The public has experienced it, and I cannot run from what the public has experienced. And if the public experienced stakeholder A not being present as opposed to stakeholder B, I think that answers the question.
Okay, so you say that you're not having direct control, which I understand. I appreciate the autonomous nature of many of these institutions. It's a problem, so that we need to have some kind of mechanism, if not an institution, that will allow for efficiency at the level of international standards that will not compromise the country in the way that it has been on so many occasions in the past. Is that correct? Because this is a national issue, isn't it? It's not just an airports issue or workers issue, or it's a national issue.
We would concur with what you have said. What the Airports Authority has, however, done, and I spoke to the question of the ASQ surveys. what we have sought to do is to share the results of those surveys with the representatives of those organizations, to show them the areas that they have indicated, that passengers have indicated that they are challenged in coming into A&R Robinson and Piaco International. And it is using that mechanism, using moral suasion, using the fact that, as you said, that this really is a national issue. It's Trinidad and Tobago looks bad. We use that as a basis, and we'll continue to be using that as a basis to bring about some kind of change. That's what we have been doing.
A predictable schedule for a week that might be subject to change. And you indicate to the agencies involved that the support requirements that we think is reasonable, all right, the support requirements that we think are reasonable are so and so for immigration, so and so for customs, so and so for whatever infrastructure, other human infrastructure that you have. And deal at a certain level with these agencies so that, in fact, you can have compliance and support. Is that possible? I mean, do we do that?
Definitely.
We do that, but I don't believe that the issues, the occasions on which you don't have compliance really has to do with lack of knowledge of how many flights are coming. I don't think that is the issue at all.
What is the problem then?
I just want to in caution, it is not pervasive, you know. And we have to be mindful, we talk about this, it is really not pervasive. There have been situations when this has occurred. And it has occurred maybe because of certain circumstances, but to talk about the fact that customs and immigration generally, and I'm not talking about scale here now, I'm looking at, because we benchmark with other airports of a similar scale, who have the similar challenges as Trinidad and Tobago in terms of that. So I don't want us to go over the perspective that, in fact, this is a pervasive and that, in fact, we are somehow errant in this area in terms of abnormal in Trinidad and Tobago. I don't want that situation to go. But as in any other jurisdiction, if there are challenges in terms of industrial relations and challenges in terms of those kind of things, it affects. And I've seen it in the Caribbean, we have seen it in Latin America, we have seen it in the United States. So I really don't want to go with the message that, you know, we beat up on customs and immigration. That is not necessary.
I'm not beating up on them, you know. I am simply trying to understand how to solve the problem. And you can't solve the problem without knowing what the issues are. And I mean, and what is the use of us having these committees to talk and nothing changes? You know, what is the point? Okay? So I will ask my other colleagues if they have some quick questions. Bear in mind the time, so I want to go as quickly as possible. I'll start with Ms. Webster.
Thank you, Chair. I'm looking at the local food court audit report from 2012. I have a few questions. One, how soon does the internal audit act on the follow up on the recommendations? Yeah.
I could ask the internal auditor acting to respond to.
Thank you, Member. We have a process which is documented in our approved policy. We follow up on recommendations. Okay, when we do audits, normally, we would have a discussion with management. And after that discussion, we would get responses to our recommendations and implementation dates. With the local food court audit, that was not done. The local food court audit was an investigation requested by the board. And we had to report directly to them. And they took action, which was to seek out an external audit. And after that action, the report and documents were submitted to the Anti-Corruption Bureau. So that wasn't the normal process for an audit. We have not been advised of the outcome.
One other issue. I noticed that you have a sort of 11% ineffectiveness, right? Is that because of staffing was the constraint?
Just a minute, member. The 89% level of efficiency, that was based upon the recommendations that we would have made for audits that we have done and which ones were implemented. What would have been excluded from the amount is recommendations that have not yet been implemented. So that would have affected our rating, making it 89%.
Usually when we have entities come before us, there's usually a problem with the internal audit unit in terms of staffing and all of that. So you're comfortable that you have the staff required to ensure that your processes are in place?
Well, yes, because our structure was changed in 2014, and it included another senior. Also, in 2015, we had on contract another senior auditor to deal with a backlog of work. So currently, we don't have any staffing issues.
Thank you, Chair. So, two quick questions. One, well actually, I'll ask the first one, because that may take longer to answer. Regarding the project in Tobago, right? Looking at $500 million there, which is significant in terms of the expenditure of the THA. I haven't worked in the Division of Finance.
I'm not sure if it's a THA.
Well, in the expenditure of Tobago itself, in terms of the government spending in Tobago. Now, really and truly, if we are saying that in Trinidad, we're looking at earnings before interest, depreciation, amortization, and tax as the benchmark for profitability of the Airports Authority in general, in Trinidad and Tobago. When you added the Tobago plant, is it that we're going to have an improvement of this metric in that at least maybe we'll have much more funds available?
That is the intent, because as I indicated, the new facilities we intend to maximize both our aeronautical and aeronautical revenue.
The question then, it begs the question then, how would that happen? Because in Trinidad, we realize that a lot of the issue with profitability, not profitability, timing of cash flow has to do with Caribbean Airlines, all right? So yes, you may make the income situation in terms of EBITDA should be okay, but really and truly, when you look at the quality of the income, you have an issue with Caribbean Airlines, which really affects sustainability of the venture. Is it that we're going to still be relying on a similar ratio with Caribbean Airlines and Tobago?
Remember, notwithstanding the challenges in terms of Caribbean Airlines and the level of the receivables, our cash flow position is significantly supported by the fact that we have been doing things in terms of both our aeronautical revenue, aeronautical and non-aeronautical revenue. So we anticipate, with a properly functioning airport in Tobago and some of the plans that we have in place to ensure that that we use the user charges model, that the cash flow will be significantly increased from the facilities. Yeah.
The other point I want to bring is just a rehashing of the first one, which is critical to competitiveness of any economy is connectivity to your trading partners. Based on our history, we have good connectivity with the North Atlantic, as is expected, Europe, America, and Britain, etc. However, our connectivity to our emerging trading partners is poor: China, India, Africa. The approach to get Emirates, which I believe still has a coach-sharing agreement with Caribbean Airlines, well, they had it when Caribbean Airlines had the London routes. I'm not sure if that continued. Okay, it doesn't. All right, so then, yes, we have the air service agreement that would be required. I'm saying, could the strategic plan could some more focus be made on getting the operationalization of this project regarding the hop to Emirates, to Dubai?
We agree with you, and that's the intention. And you talked about air services agreement with a number of entities. You talked to China, you talked to Ghana, and you also talked about the United Arab Emirates. In the committees, the standing committee on air services negotiation, we will in fact have raised these issues and ensure that I have the PSA, who's the vice chairman of the committee, ensure that in fact we work on that.
The last question I have is regarding the issue you said about the transit facilities for the hub. Is this factored in this $500 million project in Tobago, given that you said that there is a major deficiency of the terminal facilities in Piaco?
The master plan that we talked to Tobago, in fact, includes those, what I was factored into. Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Senator Robinson, you have a question?
I do have one question in relation to the time that we have. I wanted to ask about the human resource audit. And I saw that it had a recommendation here that management did not accept the internal audit's recommendations, and that was persons were hired or promoted without adequate documentation. Security employees did not score well on their academic exam or medical exam or their psychometric tests, which I find is a big one. Documents were not provided to support the selection of employees to act over eligible employees, and then employees promoted on the basis of continuous acting appointments of 1 year or more. And I see a lot of your members here today are acting. So what is the response in terms of this human resource audit that was done on the 16th of October 2017?
Human resource audit that was done covered the period 2010 to 2014, when in fact the Airports Authority was the victim of having persons who were in HR positions who in fact were not HR practitioners. Both individuals were in fact terminated for cause associated with some of the things that you're seeing in the audit. In fact, the audit came about because of the fact that the general manager would have brought it to the attention of the HR subcommittee with respect to the performance of these individuals, and both persons are no longer with the organization. Subsequent to that, the HR function has been under the auspices of the Deputy General Manager of Corporate Services, who is not here today. She's injured. And there has been a significant turnaround in terms of what is happening in terms of HR. When that particular point, what it says that we did not accept the recommendations of the audit committee, that has subsequently been addressed. It's not so again. We agree that in fact what was presented in the report was in fact accurate.
That's good, because one of your biggest or largest stated debt balance on your payable accounts is salaries payable. And if you have a lot of members who are acting in positions, and this is now going to have, if they're not permanently placed, then you also have it has a strain on the structure.
Identify that as a challenge. In fact, this new board has in fact indicated that we need to fill some of the vacancies that in those positions, those persons who have been acting for a period of time. The chairman has said the academy must end. Hollywood must end. So we'll in fact be moving swiftly to deal with that.
How then is this going to affect your present debt on your payable accounts? Because I think right now is what, 334 million, is it? Or 334,000? I'm not sure what figure this is here. For your account salaries payable for debt on your general ledger accounts.
Can I ask the financial controller, because I'm not sure what has been asked.
Our current salaries payable as of today is 84 million. Out of that includes back pay outstanding to the EPA of approximately 70 million for the period 2009 to 2014. The other back pay that is accruing amounts to the difference relates to PSA and EPA negotiations that have not yet started for the period 2014 to 16 for the PSA, and for the EPA would be 15, 16, 17.
Just to clarify, so you have outstanding back pay for 2014 to 2016? Is that what you're saying? Because I think your submission you only had security persons with outstanding back pay, and all the other permanent staff, the 765, were paid off. So just for clarification.
At the audit, the public accounts inquiry dealt with the period 2007 to 2008 to 12. So this is why that figure would just be showing what is outstanding to the EPA.
So $84 million
yes.
in debt presently, or just for 2009 to 2014?
It would be 2009 to 2014, 70 million, which is a completely negotiated period. The difference would have been relating to accruals that we would have done in the accounts, expecting salary increases.
And just for the general manager, now that you know that this is existing, is there any plans on terms of restructuring, reorganizing, relooking at positions within the Airports Authority?
I remember, I knew it existed. I knew about the back pay and I knew about the accruals. In terms of the question of reorganizing and restructuring, the Airports Authority, and we have been doing certain things in terms of benchmarking. So we have been looking at seeing what other airports have been doing in terms of their employee costs. We have been comparing it with the question of our passenger movements. But we're also mindful of the fact that in addition to the financial requirements in terms of the Airports Authority also has a responsibility in terms of the question of, one, what is happening in terms of the economics of Trinidad and Tobago and the question of sending home people. That is not a plan at all in terms of the Airports Authority. The intention is to reorganize in terms of being more efficient, utilizing ICT, ensuring that we observe methods to cut costs in terms of our operation, in terms of how we manage contracts and stuff like that. So we will be going to the board, this new board, with requesting of how we reorganize the Airports Authority to make sure that we are much more effective in what we do.
Yeah, we're closing up. So just to follow up on that, one of your main weaknesses out of the 6 points that you raised was the fact that you needed to fill vacant positions.
Yes.
And I was kind of relieved to hear you say that the report, the internal report, was based on actions between 2010 to 2014, even though the report is dated 2017.
Yes.
So there's a recommendation here that says fill the positions, and the response was not accepted in the internal report.
Fill which positions?
Fill for the structure. Management should fill vacant positions in a timely manner, especially when using acting appointments.
Okay.
And the response from the human resource audit, management response was not accepted. Now, based on what you said, would have been from 2010 to 2014.
2014 to 2014.
My question is, based on this significant weakness that you identify, what is the time frame in terms, I heard you said you're going to present it to the board, but what is the anticipated time frame for realizing
filling the vacancies? We have started already. We have 2 positions that, in fact, we have advertised, and we had interviews is going to be done, expected to be done in April. One of them is the position of the strategic HR manager, right, which is urgently needed. We anticipate that the vacant positions in the structure that, in fact, needs to be filled, that we want to do it before the 3rd quarter of this year.
Chair, what's the overtime bill for right now?
Let me just ask the financial controller. I don't have it.
Move on now. I know the question is important, but
Our overtime is approximately $2 million a month.
per month?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Look, I want to thank you all very much for attending here today. I think that based on what you said, and based on the information we have, I think the chairman, a big challenge for you, chairman, is to bring all the audited accounts up to date, make sure that that is done for the organization up to the end of 2017, and to ensure that many of the issues that were flagged by the Auditor General over the period are basically, what can I say, many of the demands and requests for compliance, that these things be satisfied. So as a board responsible for the oversight of what management does and how the organization functions and is governed, I would say that that falls squarely on the responsibility frame of the chairman and the board of directors. And the managerial issues within the organization and the deployment of staff issues, I think that that is something also that while management will make recommendations to the board, that the board takes some interest in what happens for the efficiency and effectiveness of the organization. Permanent Secretary, I want to thank you for your contribution. General Manager, I thought you were very forthright with us in the answers that you gave, and I appreciate that. And I want to thank your entire team for basically responding to the questions as we asked. I want to thank also the media who are present for, first of all, attending and taking into account the questions and answers on this very important institution in the country. And I hope that through them, the public at large will be able to benefit from the work that we did here today. I also want to thank the Deputy Auditor General and the other representative of the Auditor General's office for their input and their continuing guidance and their collaboration with the committee to make sure that we do things as well as we can, and to make sure that we come to these meetings with the intention of making things better after we leave here. There are some spillover, there are some questions that really need, I would say, some written responses. And the Parliament staff will correspond with you and ask for those questions to be answered or elaborated upon, and we hope that you will do that in short order to help us with the proceedings. Generally, from these meetings, what we do is that we do a report. We make recommendations based on what we find here, and it then goes to Parliament, and then there's a ministerial response to say that they have done this, they will do this, they can't do this for the following reasons, or what, basically outlining what has been done and what is possible. So we look forward to getting to that point and to the improvement of the Airports Authority all around. Okay? Thank you very, very much. This meeting is now adjourned.